Hello everyone, welcome back to our gaming network architecture class. This is actually our very first unit this semester that we will start talking about actually using a socket server. And we'll be installing the programs we need, and we'll be running some tests on the software packages that would enable us work and create multiplayer games and use multiplayer technology. If you remember from the last learning unit, we talked about how we can connect users and how we can actually how multiplayer or rather computer networks in the gaming design um, industry use uh, client-server paradigms to connect users and to be able to deploy the content of the game on different workstations or clients. We introduced the idea of socket servers, and we talked about socket server technology as a alternative to the polling mechanism, and that we talked about this software that basically is usually running on a remote location. We call that location as a server, and it's accessible over the internet. This software is charged with managing thousands of connections between client applications, and in our case, we are using this software package or the socket servers as the server for multiplayer games and virtual worlds. We also talked about different socket servers that are available on the market. And we talked about Electro server as being one of the most used socket server um, technologies that are used for multiplayer flash content. In fact, um, the Electro server also is used for multiplayer um, games that use C# also as their programming backbone, and Unity is one such game engine that is based on C#. So you can use Electro server in conjunction with the Unity game engine to create multiplayer games. Now in this unit, um, we will introduce the concepts and terminologies that are specific to Electro servers, and we will see how we can install the Electro server, and I'll show you the Electro server 4 installation process, Electro server 5, and also the additional software packages that we need to install and work with. And we write a simple Hello World application to see how you can configure the Electro server and how you can write a simple chat-based program. And we also look at the administration of the Electro server and how you can use the web-based administration system to perform specific kinds of tasks. Electro server is a free download and is unrestricted for up to about 25 connections or connected users at the same time. And you can go ahead and download the Electro server from the electroserver.com pages. There you will be able to access Electro server 5, which is the latest release of the Electro server. I have put all these software packages, Electro server 4, 5, and Flash Develop with Flex Compiler into our Blackboard, and I will be showing you how you can use these and how you can download this. So next we're going to go on the Blackboard, and we are going to download Electro server 5, Electro server 4, and Flash Develop with Flex Compiler, which is a IDE that allows you to write programs with ActionScript 2 and ActionScript 3 and compile them and create Flash applications. All right. Now to show you how to where to find the files that contain your Electro server socket servers, you log into your Blackboard system, and then you go to your respective class. In the undergraduate, it's 4314, and the graduate is 6314. And then you should, on the left side, you should see a bunch of links, and you've submitted your assignments through those links, and you have access to course contents. And the one at the bottom of this first section is called resources. If you click on resources, it takes you where to where you have all of the software packages that you need. And so you click on the Electro server 4 location, and you see Electro server 4_6_0_6 underscore Windows. So this is just the Windows installation. You would click on it and you would download the file, and then you would double click on the Electro Server installation file and press and forward and install the package. Alright, so the welcome screen opens up and shows you the basic screen of the Electro Server setup wizard, and then press next, agree with the license agreement, and then check everything or keep everything checked, and then choose the location where you want your server to be installed. And so what I would suggest that if you install all of these Electro Server tools into your C drive and customize that location. So I would install this Electro Server 4_6 into my Electro Server home, or you can structure it as the game network backslash Electro Server home backslash Electro Server 4_6_0_6, and then you would install it. As you see, I have already installed the Electro Server in my program files. I'll just show you the installation process. It's basically creates a shortcut for your users. So I create a shortcut here, and then choose the professional. Your IP or your host name is basically 127.0.0.1. That's your local host, and keep your port number at 8080, and keep the enabled SSL or secure socket protocols linked and checked. You can also change the administrator password and the administrator name. By default, the administrator name is administrator and the password is password. I suggest that you keep that for our development purposes. If you need, you can change them later on. And then press next, and do not install your Electro Server as a service. So keep the install as services unchecked, and then press next. And this will attempt to install your Electro Server on your machine. And wait until the Electro Server software is completely installed. And next I will show you how you can use this Electro Server software. Alright, now that you have installed your Electro Server, which is the socket server we're going to be using, we need to test it out. To test your Electro Server, just click on the start menu, go to all programs, and install and click on the Electro Server. And when I was installing it, I installed it as Electro Server 2, and I just changed that name to Electro Server in parentheses class, because this is now the fresh install. The other versions of Electro Server that you see here, I have a bunch of programs in them and packages and stuff, but we will get to those later. So you can click on your Electro Server fresh install that you have, and then you would see Electro Server start Electro Server icon. Or alternatively, you can go on the C drive where you installed your project, your socket server. I installed it on Game Networks, if you remember, and then Electro Server home and Electro Server 4_0_6. And then you have the option of either running the Electro Server or the Electro Server as a standalone service. I will run the Electro Server package. And so you will basically just run the server, and you need to wait until your Electro Server runs. Now, as you see here, the problem that I got is that I got a bunch of errors, and you may get these errors if you followed the default instruction, and that's because now your Electro Server is trying to listen to port 8080, and usually that port is reserved for HTTP protocol, and so it may be the case that your Windows would not allow your Electro server to listen to that port. If that does not happen to you, then that's fine. If it does, then just close your Electro server, and then within the main folder of the Electro server, you see a subfolder called server. Click on the server, click on the config, and then you will see a file called es4configuration.xml. This is the XML file that has your Electro server configuration written in it. Open that file, and as you see, it's an XML file, and it basically refers to the web listeners that you have set up. So as you remember, when you set up your host or the IP address, it was 127.0.0.1, and the port we installed is 8080. I just changed that into 8082 or 8081, or a port that you would know that it's probably free for your Electro server to listen to. And then save that XML file, and then go back to your Electro server main page and run the Electro server socket server. And then you would wait until your socket server starts successfully, and you would see the log that says the socket server or the Electro server has started successfully. And at this point, if you were running a program that would basically look at your Electro server as the socket server, and the client would communicate with it, you basically minimize your Electro server, and you let your programs run. And we will see a little bit later how that works. So now that we've installed our Electro server, we would have to go and install our development IDE or development environment. Our development environment, as I said, is Flash Develop. So you go and click on the Flash Develop IDE subfolder under the resources section of the Blackboard, and then you would see the Flash Develop 4.0.4 runtime machine .exe, and then click on that file and then install and download the file, the installation file. Once your installation files are downloaded, you can proceed as you did with the Electro server and install the program. And as you see here, this Flash Develop environment requires, or the Flex SDK requires Java Runtime 1.6. So we would have to go and install the runtime 1.6 if you don't have the runtime machine, and if you do and it's more than 1.6, you should be fine. Then follow all the instructions and install your Flash Develop software. It's going to by default be installed under C Program Files Flash Develop. My suggestion would be to go and install your Flash Develop into your GameNetworks Flash Develop, and you will be done. Upon the installation, the installer takes you to the wiki page of the Flash Develop, which is www.flashdevelop.org, and there you can see documentation about Flash Develop software. And basically, you can get tutorials about ActionScript 2, ActionScript 3, and these will be our ActionScript 3 will be our programming language. If you don't know ActionScript 3, it's not a big deal, essentially. Most of the packages and the files and the information that we have, I will install the backbone files for you, because our idea here is to learn Electro server and to learn the communication that will be happening with our socket servers. So the programming that you will be doing is very, very straightforward. And if you know C or C Sharp, you should be perfectly fine, and you just follow the steps, and at some point you will really get comfortable using ActionScript and programming in ActionScript. Now that we have installed our Electro server and also our Flash develop environment, let's go back to some more terminologies and techniques, or essentially informational things that we need to know before we start writing our programs. Here we will look at the concepts that Electro server employs, and we'll look at some of the terminologies that we will be referring to over and over in multiplayer games and virtual worlds. Most of these concepts are very popular, and other servers also share these concepts. So it's not something that's quite unique to Electro server. And these concepts include things such as users, rooms, zones, chat, buddies, the object that's unique to our server, our socket server, which is called the Electro server's objects, or ES object. And then we talk about the variable types, and then we move on to topics such as extensions, event handlers, plugins, and manager objects. A user is basically a representation of your clients that are connected to the server, and also that are logged in. It's possible for a single user to establish more than one connection to the server and still be seen as one single user. Because of this, it should be noted that while a user usually has only one connection to the server, they can also have more than one. For example, to stream a video from a server, a client that is using Electro server basically establish a second connection to handle the audio and video streams. And so basically, but in essence, each one of those clients, regardless of the number of connections that they have with the server, will be seen as one single user. However, the term that is used here in this class is very loosely established. Depending on the context, you may refer to either the representation of a connected client, or maybe we will just use that as just the term client. Or we can also refer to as a human being who is connected to the server. A room is a general common concept that all of the socket servers basically refer to, and is an area or a bunch of connections of or collections of users that are connected to your server at a time, and they have some sort of relationship. In Electro server, room is basically a way to for one users to be able to communicate and see and interact with many other users. If a user is in a room, then that user can send messages to others in that room, either in an individual basis or broadcast his messages to all of the users in that room. A user can be also in multiple rooms at a time, so depending on the connection, you may be actually represented into essentially multiple areas of your connections. There are two types of rooms in Electro server. There's a persistent room, is a room that always exists even if there are no users in it. A persistent room also always allows users to join and leave at any time. Dynamic rooms are rooms that are created for a single use, and when the user list for that room is empty, or basically drops them down to 0, basically when all of the users have left that room, then the room will be destroyed automatically. And in most socket server connection techniques, the dynamic rooms are the most persistent kinds of rooms. You can use rooms and the concept of rooms in many different ways. There are two most common ways that rooms are used. The first common way is when you basically enable users in a set of connections to be able to chat with each other, or also to maintain a sort of multiplayer togetherness for the users, basically group users as a group. Both of these common uses can be explored, and we will see them later on in our class, how to use these common ways of essentially establishing groups of users in a room and have communication between them happen. A zone is a collection of rooms. So if you think of a room being a collection of users, a zone can be a collection of rooms in that same way. The concept of zone is mostly valuable as an organizational tool for the servers to that deal with a large number of users. The only thing that you need to remember is that rooms within a zone must have unique names, and all of the users in a room that's within a zone have access to the room list for that zone. So, for example, if you have zone 1 with the rooms lobby, front chat, and news chat, the names of these rooms within zone 1 must be unique. So you cannot have another news chat or another lobby room named in the same zone. A user in one room in the zone will have access to the list of all the other rooms in the zone, so they can move back and forth between the rooms. However, rooms within different zones may have the same name. As you see here, you have a lobby room in zone 1 and a lobby room in zone 2. But the user who's in lobby room in zone 1 will not be able to see users in lobby room in another zone. If a room list is very large or it's very active, with many rooms being created and destroyed, you may find that connected users may receive too many updates per second to keep up with this information. Using more zones is one way to deal with this situation and to attempt to manage it. So if you have a bunch of rooms that are extremely active, grouping them together under one zone may basically clog the system for the users to be able to keep up with the passages of the information. So you can create a new zone and transfer some of these rooms into the new zones to decrease the traffic of the communication that is happening. Chat is a primary method that your users can interact with each other while you're connected to a socket server. A chat message is a text that is sent from one user to another user. In Electro server and also in many other socket server solutions, there are public and private chat messages. A public chat message is being sent to everyone around, or basically in a room. So it's basically a way of broadcasting the message to all users in that room. Typically, a public chat message basically ends up being displayed on the client in a text field. For example, the picture on the right shows how one person has basically broadcasted her message to all of the people who were watching in that room. A private chat message is going to be sent from one user directly to another, or you can actually have a list of users that you want your private message to be going to. Unlike the public messages, the target user does not need to be in the same room as the sender, which is a really interesting concept here. So if you have someone who's in another room and you don't see them, you can still message them. You can still send them a private message. In multiplayer games and virtual worlds, private messages happen only between users who are considered as buddies, which brings us to the next concept, buddies. In social networking, that is basically becoming an enormous part of our typical multiplayer experience. We can basically, in addition to playing games and competing, you can also form relationships that would basically be beyond just one session of playing with someone in a multiplayer game. So with this idea, you can flag any of the people who you contacted or connected to within your virtual world or the multiplayer and add them to a list that is referred to as buddies list. When a user returns to the application later on, they can see that their buddies list shows how many, if any of their friends are online, and so that you can communicate with them even though you're not in the same room. Actually, as of now, I think most of the multiplayer games and virtual worlds allow users to send messages offline messages to the people from their buddies list that are not active or online at the same time. So you can set up meeting appointments later on to join and to play with each other in the multiplayer game. Alright, now let's talk about something that's very specific to Electro Server, which is called Electro Server Objects, or ES objects. This is the first concept that is introduced here, which is very much specific to the Electro Server. Other servers, socket servers, would have their own kinds of objects that you would be able to use. An ES object is basically a class that exists in identical form on both the server and also your client. A new instance of this class is created, and the data is then stored into this object. The object will be exchanged between the client and server very easily, because the transaction layers in your socket server knows how to serialize and deserialize this object. I'll talk about serialization and deserialization a little bit later. We use Electro Server objects very extensively in our class. And so, for example, you can create an Electro Server object, and then you can create name for it, and any kind of other types that you want to associate with it, and then send it back and forth between your client and server. There's here I have the complete list of data types that Electro Server supports. They can be string, integers, numbers, booleans, bytes, character, double, float, long and short, and also you can attach AS objects to another ES object. These can also be present in the form of an array, so we can also have an array of integers, an array of booleans, and so forth. At first you might think that why putting all of these kinds of data types in an ES object is a good idea. Basically, when you look at this in terms of saving time, it would be really, it is actually essentially very helpful that your ES objects restrict data types to reduce any kind of ambiguity that you would be introducing to your code, and also forcing the programmers to follow a certain kind of mechanism or way that you can later on, when your programs become larger, you can manage them. Using Electro Server objects also helps with your bandwidth. The serialization process of your Electro Server objects, which is hidden from you, generate packet sizes that are basically very minimal and small when it comes to the transmission of your data, and therefore this would keep your bandwidth to a minimum. And again, as I said, I'll talk about serialization and deserialization of your ES objects a little bit later. In addition to providing high scalability functionality to basically the number of connections that you can accumulate and you can handle and support, most socket servers primarily provide a basic level of functionality right out of the box. Like, for example, the concepts of rooms, the concepts of chatting and sending messages, the concept of buddies lists, and friends lists, and a few other topics. However, when it comes to features and functionalities that you need for your own specific kind of game that you're developing, or the virtual world that you're creating, many socket servers, including Electro Server, would not have those actually as a built-in mechanism. However, a good socket server would allow you to build these kinds of functionalities and allow ways that you could include those functionalities on top of the baseline functionalities that your server comes with. And this brings us to the topic of extending the functionalities of your servers by means of extensions. Electro Server and many other servers, socket servers, provide support for these so-called extensions. An extension is a custom code that runs on the server, and it provides features and functionalities that are not built into the server, but as a customized game or customized virtual world, your server would have to be able to handle those kinds of functionalities. An extension can include one or many types of objects to extend certain functionalities to your Electro server. And there are three types of objects that are supported by means of an extension to enhance your Electro server: event handlers, plugins, and managed object factories. Each object can include variables to define values that should be known to the object upon its creation, and we'll talk about these. Event handlers allow a developer to have a custom logic that is applied as a result of an event. These are typically written in Java, or you can use C# or even ActionScript. Electro Server currently allows event handlers to be created for these specific kinds of events or event types: a login, a logout event, user variable, room variable, buddy list, and private public messaging. Login is when a user is logging into the Electro server, and in contrast, logout is when the user logs out of your Electro server. User variables basically is an updated Electro server object attached to the user object. As a room variable, users can update your Electro server objects that are attached to a room, and with the buddies list, you can add, edit, or delete users from this list, and users can also send messages to another entity, such as a room or another user, through a public or a private message. Let me take a look at let's take a look at a login event handler as an example. When your client connects to an Electro server, they would provide their login credentials, and you can check their name and their password and authenticate them against a database. The event handler then decides if the login should be accepted or the user should be rejected and their connections should be dropped. Plugins, which are also often written in Java, provide extended functionalities where the code or the core features of your server does not offer, and they are needed. Clients can talk to plugins, and plugins can talk to each other. Electro Server supports two types of plugins: room plugins and server plugins. A room plugin is in charge of any functions that may need to be attached to any particular room. For example, you can use these to handle the game logic and any other additional room functionalities that you want to have. A good example of a room plugin is like, for example, a card game. The plugin would handle all of the logic for dealing cards, which players receive them or calculate the scores, and also decides who the winner was. A room level plugin is created and scoped into a room, and therefore the instance clients can talk to any room level plugin that is basically within the scope of that room that they're currently in. Server plugins extend the ability that the Electro server can perform. These may range from globally enhancing room functions to exposing an external interface to other applications that would like to leverage certain aspects of your game. Server level plugins can be created once and always exist, and these are in contrast with room level plugins that when you create a new room you would have to create them as needed. As an example of a good server level plugin, you can look at, for example, remote RSS feeds when news are being updated. Let's suppose that in your virtual world you required news entries to be displayed in some way or shape in the world. There should be a server extension, or a server plugin rather, that would load and manage this news. In this case, you would create a server level plugin that loads the latest news from, say, a database, such as an XML file, and any other plugin within the game can access the latest news through this server level plugin. Managed object factories allow you to create instances of objects that need to remain active over time. One common object created through this kind of factory is a database connection. This will allow you to define the properties and database type to connect to and retrieve the data from within a plugin. Now that we talked about the Electro server objects and data types, and essentially different mechanisms that your Electro server allows you to extend functionalities with, and also we installed your Electro server 4.0.6 and your Flash develop IDE. We will talk about the Electro server API, and at this point I'll let you finish up any business in terms of installing your IDE, your Flash Develop IDE for ActionScript, and your Electro server, and I'll come back in the next video to talk about the API and create a Hello World example.